standard of actuarially sound.
As the 2004 and 2005 hurricane seasons taught us, Mother Nature can be unpredictable. Who would have thought that Charlie, Francis, and Jean would have bypassed the Keys and caused so much damage in Charlotte County and as far inland as Orlando? Who would have thought that Wilma would have caused greater damage per policy in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade counties than in Monroe?
As our governor recently stated in the newspaper, no area of Florida is immune from the risk of being in the path of a hurricane. Why then are Monroe County windstorm rates so disproportionately high? Or stating this another way, if hurricane risks throughout the state are the same, then why aren't the windstorm rates throughout the state the same?
The message seems to be that all coastal regions of Florida are vulnerable to hurricane damage. But different regional factors impact the extent of damage in these coastal regions.
I'll tell you one quickie. I escape to Delray Beach every time there's a hurricane predicted. My dog is accepted at the Colony Hotel. She loves the beach. They have a beach club. We go up there. So it worked until Wilma came, because we left for Wilma. And then Wilma came through here, did very little damage wind-wise, almost none. All the damage was flood. Then Wilma came around and nailed, coming the other way, nailed Delray Beach, blew the windows out of this hotel, blew the windows out of every car in the parking lot, and so forth. Density-wise, citizens lost a heck of a lot more money in Delray Beach than they did in Monroe County. I think you get the point. Thank you.
The people who live in the Keys recognize that their paradise can be dangerous, that the potential for hurricanes is a fact of life. That's why they build homes to withstand strong winds. Monroe County has the strictest building codes in the state of Florida, and the county enforced these strict building standards well before the state required them.
Key West was founded in the early 1820s, and the first settlers who came here brought with them building traditions which put them in a good place for building solid buildings that could withstand hurricanes. A lot of the first settlers came here from the Bahamas, which is also prone to hurricanes, and they, in some cases, even imported their houses directly from the Bahamas. A couple houses that are reportedly moved here directly from the Bahamas. And they were massively built with heavy timber frames, and they continue to be standing here in Key West. Another important consideration in terms of this historic district is the enormous quantity of restoration and rehabilitation that's taken place here over the last 30 years. We've seen this huge reinvestment in the historic district, and hundreds of buildings have been painstakingly rehabilitated over the last 30 years and are in better shape now than they probably ever were, including when they were constructed, because they were already stoutly built, and then they've been brought up to modern building codes as well, so that, for example, uplift connectors are now used to hold the rafters down to the walls and to hold the sills onto the foundation piers and so on. So the buildings are probably in better shape now than they've been in a long, long time. We're looking at St. Paul's Church, which was founded in the 1830s. The first building was built shortly thereafter. And it uses what was a very promising and interesting new material in the early 20th century, which is poured reinforced concrete.
Yeah, I'm Sylvia Shelley. I've lived in this island for 85 years. I've gone through all the hurricanes. What I don't understand, and I've told this to people, I don't know whether they think I'm crazy, and maybe I am, but years ago, all these old conch houses were built by fishermen that knew the elements. There were no plywood and all this junk, and they were built up off the ground and with the old conch shutters, and they're still here.
A lot of the older homes in Key West were designed in the late 1800s and early 1900s, right after a few large storms had hit the Keys, Key West and the Upper Keys. These homes were built in the post and beam design with wooden pegs as opposed to nails. And the wooden pegs are still here today. In many of the homes, you'll see them functioning just the way they did 100 years ago. The wooden pegs don't corrode. It allows for a stronger structure. Post-Hurricane Andrew, the state of Florida created a Florida building code. And Monroe, Dade, and Key West all now use a 150-mile-an-hour building code. A home is designed to be tied into the ground and be connected all the way to the top of the roof, including all its components and cladding, the outside windows, the roof members, the wall. Our metal roofs will withstand a significant amount of wind load. So Key West is doubled by adding that extra 50 miles an hour that our homes are designed for. A storm can pass and we are twice as protected as, say, some of the counties in central Florida, which only go by a 100-mile-an-hour code. Now, what we've seen in the past few years is that a Category 2 and 3 storm can move across the entire state of Florida.
In the western panhandle, there are some counties that exempted themselves from the, I say exempted themselves, that are under a building code that is not as strict as the statewide building code with regard to the winds, sustainable winds.
After Hurricane Charlie, I personally went to the Fort Myers area, Captiva and Sanibel, right near where the eye hit. And you could clearly see the difference in construction between the new Florida building code and the old building code. And as you move inland toward Orlando after Hurricane Charlie, you could see many more of roofs destroyed than even closer to the coast. In the Florida Keys, there's no structures that are over a mile from shore. Every structure is considered in a hazardous region. And therefore, many of the buildings have some additional structural elements that you wouldn't find just 10 miles inland from other counties in the state, for instance, on the Gulf Coast. Our homes are required to have shutters, whereas in portions of the Panhandle, except for the outer 1-mile perimeter, these shutters aren't necessarily required by the state code. There are some counties that it's not required at all.
And you know, one of the things I found, and I do a lot of construction loans, and one of the things I've seen here is even in comparison to what is built in, say, Fort Myers, where I also do construction loans, our loans here, I mean our properties here, the foundation, the concrete that goes into it, the rebar, everything that's done to build down here is so much stronger than you see in other places. And you know, it causes the cost of our houses to be so much higher to begin with. But, you know, I think that should be factored in. And also the fact that, you know, we build up on stilts, we do everything we can to protect ourselves from these storms. And yet we're paying the penalty by having higher insurance.
As a larger storm approaches, the height of the waves actually create a friction layer that reduces the wind. So since we are immediately adjacent to the water up and down the entire Keys, we don't have, the larger the storm, even though the winds are increased, we do see a reduction in wind at the low-lying levels.
Most of the Keys didn't suffer a lot of wind damage, but suffered mostly flood damage. We're finding out now that, with high deductibles, most people aren't getting any recovery from their wind insurance. I think of all the properties that we manage or control as a company, the premiums collected for wind damage were less than $20,000, whereas the flood claims associated with those same properties exceeded $500,000.
Another thing that Keys residents know is that everything is connected, that we're all in this together. They know, for instance, that hurricanes don't care if you're homesteaded or not. Any solution to the windstorm crisis that distinguishes between homesteaded and non-homesteaded properties not only will worsen Monroe County's affordable housing crisis and cripple the vacation home and snowbird economy, but it's just not fair.
If the risks are the same, the rates should be the same. Now, basically what's happening is you know what computer models are like. What you come out with is absolutely dependent on what you put in and what the assumptions are. And the assumptions generated by I guess, the meteorologists that have so much to do with this lead it to what the results are. But I mean, the relationship is exactly what you're saying, is if in fact the relative risk on the coastal, particularly, well, down in the Keys, is overstated, then in fact the rates are overstated.
Monroe County represents a tiny portion of the population of Florida, a tiny portion of all property insurance policies statewide, and a small portion of all citizens' policies in Florida. But we're just the tip of the iceberg. The crisis in windstorm insurance rates is not now and will not ever be confined to Monroe County. Any Floridian who lives near a coast will eventually be touched, if not literally moved, by this steamroller.
Good morning, 8:57 The Time. I'm Pam Gigante in the NBC6 newsroom. Dozens of elderly residents of a South Florida apartment complex could soon find themselves with nowhere to live. Increasing insurance premiums in the wake of last year's hurricanes have forced the owners of the complex in the 3900 block of Southwest 102nd Avenue to raise the rent. Most of the residents living there are living in Section 8 housing. The government refuses to cover the cost of the rent increase. We spoke with somebody from Pinewood Associates, which owns the complex. They say their hands are tied, and while they feel bad, they have no choice but to increase the rent costs.
The Florida Keys are a national treasure and invaluable to the tourism economy of the state. It's the people who live here, who take visitors fishing, who wait tables in our restaurants, who respond to emergencies, who teach our children, who entertain us, who fix our air conditioners, who control mosquitoes, that make the Keys what they are, that make them attractive to visitors from around the world, including the rest of the state of Florida. But skyrocketing windstorm insurance rates are the straw that is breaking the camel's back, making the Keys unaffordable and destroying these vibrant communities.
Some people think that the increased premiums have the greatest impact on homeowners, which it does. Our police officers will not be able to buy a home. They cannot do that today, and they definitely won't be able to do it in the future. But it's also putting great pressure on the rental market. We're going to see rents increase significantly as a result of the increase in windstorm premiums. So this increase that we're anticipating will have a tremendous impact on our ability to recruit and retain officers. We have to have police officers. Without police officers, trained police officers, we are going to have a very difficult situation within this community.
The crisis is real. The need is urgent. Insurance in Monroe County, indeed throughout the state, is in dire need of transformation before our coastal areas become the exclusive playground of the very, very wealthy who can afford to self-insure, and the relatively poor who cannot afford insurance at all.